to our academy. We have a very exciting program for tonight for you with a very special presenter. Mary Lou Williams is a distinguished Toastmaster, which is a very high honor for those of you that are not Toastmasters. She has been a Toastmaster for 13 years, and she became a professional storyteller as a result of completing the Toastmaster Storytelling Manual. She's even authored a book herself that is called 10 Fractured Fairy Tales. Mary Lou is a member of the Florida Storytelling Association and the Tamiami Tale Tellers of Fort Myers. We can do a little tongue twister. Tamiami Tale Tellers of Fort Myers. Today, Mary Lou is going to give us the inside details on how to create and deliver a tall tale. You are in for a treat. Rest assured, I promise you that. And our one and only master storyteller, Mary Lou Williams, join me in welcoming her.
Toastmaster, can everybody hear me? Is this mic loud enough? Okay. Tonight I will be, as John said, telling you about the tall tale, what a tall tale is. And I'll begin with the definition of a tall tale. A tall tale is a story, a fictional story, told as a personal narrative, told in the form of a personal narrative. A tall tale is usually, but not always, told in the first person. The story begins as a true life reminiscence. It starts out plausibly and realistically with ordinary details that gradually become more absurd, outlandish, and implausible until the story departs completely from the world of possibility. This is done through exaggeration, the essence of a tall tale. That's where the tall tale comes from. Now, some examples of most tall tale exaggerations, most common types of tall tale exaggerations involve size, but also they can involve extreme abilities of intelligence or strength, or aggressiveness of animals and weather. Some examples of tall tale exaggerations are as follows. It was so cold that all spoken words froze solid before they could be heard. People had to wait till the spring thaw before they could hear each other. It was so cold that the fire froze, and it's so cold the snow turned blue and the fire froze. People broke it off and used it for pepper. It was so hot that the chickens laid hard-boiled eggs, and the corn popped in the cornfield. The popped corn looked like snow. It was 3 feet deep. The cows thought it was a blizzard and froze to death. Now, tall tales also often have comic and concrete comparisons in which animals take on human characteristics and inanimate objects seem alive, such as walking catfish, talking dogs, or teenage cars with attitudes. In the performance of a story, the tall tale teller uses a deadpan style and comic understatement, telling the tale as if he believes every word and cannot understand why people are laughing. The contrast, as the story becomes more and more ridiculous and absurd, the teller becomes more and more serious and sincere. The contrast between the absurdity of the content and the seriousness of the telling is what gives the tall tale its unique humor and effect. Now, how many here are thinking of competing in the tall tale contest? Just thinking about it anyway. Great, okay. Now, the purpose of the workshop tonight is to introduce you to the tall tale genre. And to understand its spirit and its nature, it's good to know a little bit about its history, as it is with any people or with any people or peoples. It's a good thing to know how it originated. So the origins of the tall tale. The tall tale is a quintessential American art form. It is the predominant form of American folk literature. The tall tale originated in the bragging contests that were held among men of the American frontier. The tall tales of the 18th and 19th centuries are therefore quite macho and politically incorrect. They gave short shrift to women, minorities, and the environment. They were a reflection of their time and place. tales are also a reflection of their time and place and do not have this characteristic of the traditional tall tale. Now, legendary and mythical characters of the Old West were often the subjects of tall tales. Legendary figures were based on actual historical individuals such as Johnny Appleseed, who really existed, who traveled the West planting apple trees, or Daniel Boone, who blazed a path across the Cumberland Gap to found the first English-speaking colonies west of the Appalachian Mountains, Davy Crockett, who died at the Battle of the Alamo, or John Henry, the steel-driving African-American, who laid the railroad tracks that took the country west. Mythical figures were fictional and larger-than-life representations of men who worked in frontier occupations, like Paul Bunyan, the huge lumberjack, or Pecos Bill, the cowboy who tamed the Wild West. Now, there's a modern-day equivalent of a tall tale fictional character, tall tale mythical character, and a lot of novels were written about him in the 20th century. And movies based on those novels were made starting in the 1950s and continuing up to the present time. You all know who he is. He's very popular. And ironically, he's an Englishman, not an American. Does anyone know the character I'm talking about? Anyone? Tell me.
James Bond?
Bond!
Yeah.
James Bond, yes.
Good one.
Bond, James Bond. Now, the tradition of the bragging contest in which the tall tale originated is continued throughout the United States at what are called liars' contests. Now, some of the best known of these are in West Virginia, Nebraska, Florida, Indiana, California, and Texas, which, like a well-known burger chain, could be called the home of the Whopper. The tradition is also continued in Toastmasters public speaking clubs, which in certain states hold annual tall tale competitions. Now, the tall tale, although it originated in the oral tradition among men of the American frontier who were often illiterate, also has a literary heritage. Mark Twain and Washington Irving made literary use of the tall tale. Washington Irving's Rip Van Winkle and the Legend of Sleepy Hollow have tall tale aspects to them, in a 20-year nap and a headless horseman. The celebrated Jumping Frog of Calaveras County launched the career of Mark Twain. It was a tall tale. Now, there is a modern-day tall tale teller named Bill Lepp. Has anybody ever heard of Bill Lepp? You don't count. You don't count. How did you?
He's the most famous, non-famous person.
Can you? Wait till next time. Wait till next month. Now, they heard of him because I told them about it. But anyway, Bill Lepp, not many people know this, but Bill Lepp is world famous. Now, you've never heard of him, and yet he's world famous, because he's world famous in the world of storytelling, which is below the radar of mainstream America. But in the world of storytelling, Bill Lepp is the king of the tall tales. He's a 5-time winner of the West Virginia Liars Contest. Now, I'm going to read you a brief excerpt from a review of a Bill Lepp performance, because I think it captures the essence of his art, and I think it captures the essence of the tall tale in general. And here is that quote. With Lepp, the sorry, low-down lie becomes a grand and glorious creation, a verbal sculpture in which 100 small fibs, stretches, falsehoods, and prevarications are piled together, shaped and molded into one stunning, awe-inspiring cathedral of flapdoodle and bow. Bob Wells in Duke Divinity magazine. Prior to becoming a full-time liar, Bill Lepp had a career as a minister. And that is not a tall tale. And if you want to hear a great tall tale, an example of a great tall tale, go on the internet and look for The 7th Second by Bill Lepp, And you can find it on YouTube. And it's only 7 or 8 seconds long, minutes long. It's called a 7-second, and you will hear the best example of a tall tale that I think ever existed, right? If you listen to that, you'll know what a good tall tale is like. Yes. Yes, Bill Lepp's name is spelled with 1 L and 2 P's. It's B-I-L, and Lepp is L-E-P-P. So Bill doesn't have an extra L, but his last name has an extra P. Now, in summary, the characteristics of a tall tale are as follows. First characteristic, a tall tale involves exaggeration, the essence of it. Secondly, a tall tale is usually, although not always, told in the first person. And when it is, the narrator is an active participant in the tale, which lends the tale authenticity. Third, the tall tale starts off as true and plausible. Fourth, there is a gradual buildup of exaggeration and absurdity. 5, there is a comic comparison in which animals take on human characteristics, not always, often, but it doesn't always have to be the case. There is often a comic comparison in which animals take on human characteristics and inanimate objects seem alive. And 6, the story is told in a deadpan style, as if the teller believed every word. This last aspect of the tall tale, the style in which it is told, is as important as the content and the telling of the tall tale. The audience's belief in the teller's sincerity, in the absurd and outlandish events that he is relaying, is a big part of the humor of a tall tale. The most important thing that the teller can establish with the audience is sincerity. Once he can fake that, he can fake anything. Now, I'd like at this point to have you look at the handouts, or take the handouts that will be given you by Wanda, our Toastmaster for the evening, and Emily. And in those handouts, you will have a summary of the information that I just gave you. And you will also have the first and second pages of the Judge's Guide and Ballot for Tall Tale Contests. And you'll get, and the first part, the first 2 pages are just exactly what I told you, a summary of what I just told you. And the last 2 pages are the Judge's Ballots and the Judge's Ballots and Guides. Now, if you look at the second page of the Judge's Ballot, it's the last page of the handout, you will see under speech development what they expect as far as the content of the tall tale goes. That's the way the speaker puts ideas together so the audience can understand them. A good tall tale speech immediately engages the audience's attention and smoothly builds up to a climax and conclusion. That's because the tall tale, if it has a climax and conclusion, that implies it must be a story. A tall tale is not just a series of absurd events. It has to be connected by a theme or a plot. So it's not like one, just as a humor speech contest is not a series of one-liners. This is not a series of absurd events. It has to have a story to it, or a theme at least. And so that's the development of it. And then under the delivery, this refers to the use of various tall tale skills, such as exaggeration, which I've already pointed out to you, irony, puns, the lowest form of humor, is a favorite form of humor of the tall tale, because it's the lowest form of tale, right? Humor and surprise twists. These techniques are the essence of the tall tale, and they must be fully incorporated into the tale. And on the preceding page, they have a summary of these guidelines under speech development and special techniques. Speech development, opening, build-up, climax, organization, smoothness, And under speech techniques, it has effective use of exaggeration. Notice this, how that comes first. Irony, the opposite, saying the opposite of what one means. Puns, they love puns in tall tales. And surprise, twist, humor, and slapstick, etc. So these are the judges' criteria that Toastmasters lays down for judging a tall tale speech or tall tale story. So those two criteria, the characteristics that I gave you and the criteria that the Toastmasters lays down for judging a tall tale contest are really complement each other, and they are compatible. So now, the best way to understand what a tall tale is to hear one. You can have all the definitions in the world and all the descriptions of it in the world, but unless you hear one, you really don't know what one is. So I am going to tell you a tall tale. And as I tell it, I would like you to think as I tell it, if the story has the criteria of a tall tale that the Toastmasters judges will be looking for that we just discussed. And it doesn't have the characteristics of the tall tale that I gave you in the introductory presentation. Now, the story I'm going to tell is a fish story, which is appropriate for a tall tale, because fish stories are traditionally tall tales. So this is a fish story, which I hope has all the characteristics. Now, as I said, a tall tale doesn't have to have all the characteristics that I listed, but it should have some of them. And it does, so for instance, it doesn't have to be told in the first person. It doesn't have to have an animal taking main characteristics. But so it can deviate from that a little bit. So as I tell the story, I might not follow all my rules that I laid out. So see which ones I did follow and which ones I didn't. Okay? And which ones I follow that the Toastmasters lays down as their criteria as well. Okay. Roga, a fish story. When I first moved down to Florida 15 years ago, now, 15 years ago, yes, I knew hardly anyone. So I decided that I would get a pet to keep me company. There was a problem, however. The condominium association I moved into did not allow pets. Now, I decided I was going to get around this rule because I really wanted a living creature to keep me company. I couldn't get a dog or a cat. They would be too noticeable. So I decided I would get a fish. Once I had it in the house, nobody would know it was there, and I would have my living creature to keep me company. So I went to the pet shop, and there in the shop window was the cutest little fish I had ever seen. He wagged his tail, he flapped his fins, he puffed his gills, he looked up at me with his big black eyes. He wiggled his whole body. This was no cold fish. It was love at first sight. And it was mutual. He was a dogfish, so I named him Rover. But he wasn't a mongrel dogfish. He was a cocker spaniel dogfish. He had a pedigree. He came with papers and everything. I waited until it was dark, and then I sneaked over into my house. He turned out to be the best pet that anyone could ever want. When I came home at night, he was always so glad to see me. He would hop right out of the water. Sometimes he would hop out of the water and right into my arms. And I would pet him. And he would sort of purr, 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 like a catfish. And then after a while, he'd start to gasp, like a fish out of water. Gets worse. Which, of course, he was. And then I knew it was time to put him back in his tank. Then I noticed something. He was able to stay out of the water a little bit longer each time before he started gasping. And I thought to myself, maybe if I kept him out a little bit longer each time after he started gasping, maybe I could wean him from his dependency on water, his substance of choice. He drank like a fish,
Yeah.
I told him. But I suppose it was genetic. Anyway, I figured I'd try. At first it was just a matter of seconds. Then it was a matter of minutes. And finally, it was a whole hour. This is wonderful, I thought. He can sit on the couch with me while I watch a movie. I got a movie I thought he would enjoy. Moby Dick! Well, he got so wrapped up in that movie that he forgot all about his addiction. And he stayed out of the water the whole time that movie was on. And that movie was 2 hours long. This is wonderful, I thought. I got more movies like that. I got The Little Mermaid and Flipper and 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. And each one was a little bit longer than the one before. And he stayed out a little bit longer each time. And this is wonderful. I was so encouraged. I got 2 movies in a row. I got the Poseidon Adventure and Titanic.
Yeah.
And then I got Waterworld and The Perfect Storm. He stayed out for the full double feature each time. Now he was staying out 4 hours in a row. Then I pushed my luck. I got Jaws. Well, he was so scared. He had a relapse. He fell off the wagon and right back into his fish tank. He stayed tanked for a week. But then I lured him out with Finding Nemo. That was his favorite. And I immediately followed that by Mutiny on the Bounty and Pirates of the Caribbean. And he stayed out for the 3 movies. Now he was staying out 6 hours in a row. Well, after that, it was just a matter of time before he was staying